Bojo, Bojo, Jean-Paul Restul and Indishnikas, Wajashna Dodam, Okiganot Minasing Nadonjiba, Anishinaabe and Dao, Wemitagoshi and Dao, Minogijigat. It's a beautiful day for our webinar. And I just want to say, oh, I'm hearing myself speak. I think I'm getting some delay, Callan. So I just want to acknowledge the Lekwungen territory on which I'm on, and that the University of Victoria stands upon, and the Songhees, Esquimalt, and Wasanich peoples whose historical relationships with the land continue to this day. It's always a great privilege to do our work on this land, so I'm a grateful visitor. Have been here at UVic since 2017. Came from Anishinaabe Aki. I'm a member of the Dokis First Nation, which is on the islands in the French River that go from Lake Nipissing to Georgian Bay. So it's a very beautiful place. And also want to mention the Kikinoo'amaadawin project, which is part of what's able to sponsor this webinar today. What we are doing with our work is encouraging teachers to take up Indigenous education and bring perspectives into their practice. And these are webinars that are designed to help you do some of that work and encourage you to do some of these things, introduce you to resources and people who are doing this work. So I just want to say Chimigwech for joining us on this webinar, and I'll pass it over to Angela.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, John Paul. My name is Dr. Angela Nardozzi, and I'm a guest and settler here on Turtle Island with both sides of my family originating in Italy. I'm coming to you from Toronto, which is the traditional territories of the Haudenosaunee, the Mississauga of the Credit, and also the Wendat people. I'm really excited. This is the first out of a few webinars actually that we're doing in partnership with the Robertson Program with the theme of Indigenous Ways of Knowing in Math and Science. So Larissa's here and is going to tell us a little bit about maybe herself and also what is the Robertson Program, Larissa?
Thanks, Angela. Like Angela said, my name is Larissa and I'm the director of the Robertson Program for inquiry-based teaching in math and science. And some of our goals include engaging teachers in math and science learning through professional development. We have worked with teachers across the province, mainly in spatial reasoning and geometry. And we also work directly with children in playful ways to increase math. So we're so excited to be partnering with Angela and John Paul in this webinar series, because throughout our work with teachers, a common question we hear is how to incorporate Indigenous ways of knowing in math and science into the classroom. So it's so nice. I've been looking at the chat. It's so nice to have so many of you here with us today. And we're all really excited to learn from Bryan's experience. Angela?
Thanks so much. So, okay, folks, how we're going to work today is I'm about to introduce Bryan. Bryan's going to share what he's learned and what he's doing. And then we're going to, you can put your questions throughout the webinar into the chat on YouTube. And then we're going to take the questions at the end. Okay. And then, of course, we're going to have some final notes and wrap up. So without further ado, we've got Bryan Bellefeuille with us, everyone. Bryan is the father of three and is from Anishinaabe of Nipissing First Nation. He's a firekeeper, a grass dancer, and a traditional fisherman. Bryan graduated from the Schulich School of Education at Nipissing University after completing an undergraduate degree in mathematics. During his time enrolled, he was invited to speak at the Perimeter Institute for Theoretical Physics regarding Indigenous Mathematics, as well as attend a session of the same topic at the Fields Institute of Mathematical Science. Bryan previously worked with Indigenous people within the Ontario and Canadian criminal justice system as a Gladue Report Writer. During that time, he was part of the team that edited the Ontario curriculum for grade 10 history in response to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action numbers 2 and 63. Currently, Bryan is teaching at Blind River Public School on the North Shore of Lake Huron as an Ojibwe language teacher and an Indigenous culture and curriculum support worker, where he works with teachers to integrate Indigenous knowledge into other parts of the curriculum. Bryan, we are so excited to have you. How are you doing today?
Oh, miigwech. Oh, I'm doing quite well. Thank you very much. I'm excited to speak. So thank you for having me here. And yeah, I'm so excited to share the knowledge that I've been given by so many people.
Awesome. So Bryan, go ahead when you're ready, share your screen. And we can't wait to hear what you've got to share with us today. And I gotta say, I'm admiring a few things. I'm admiring the artwork behind you.
Okay.
I don't know, you don't have to say anything if you don't want, but it's gorgeous. And go ahead when you're ready.
Okay, thank you. The artwork behind me was made by a wonderful individual in my reserve, Sam Yanscombe, and she did a wonderful piece, and I'm so grateful for her to have shared it with me. And for now, I'm going to share with you my screen. So I'm going to hit share. And I think we might be good to go.
Yeah.
Perfect. So, traditional Indigenous mathematics by myself on this date. So, as said, I'm a father. I'm a son to two wonderful people. Growing up, this is Nipissing First Nation. This is where I'm from. So it's beside North Bay. As you see, there's a little spot of North Bay in it, and Nipissing First Nation is pictured way on the other side of this beautiful rectangle. But actually, where I grew up was much closer to the city of North Bay. I grew up on a point on the east in what's called Deshaney. So it's a smaller village, and that's where I'm from. So I would bike to North Bay, which isn't as impressive when I say I'm right beside North Bay, as opposed to being from where the Google puts the dot. So so please note that I didn't bike that far. Oh my goodness. So that's where I'm from. Now, where I live now, Mississauga First Nation is where I reside. And this rectangle, anyone watching from Mississauga is laughing because this rectangle isn't all of Mississauga. Mississauga is much bigger. It goes way more north. But as we see, it's by a little old Blind River. Now, my friends don't get that confused with Deep River. Blind River is a small town between Sudbury and Sault Ste. Marie on the north shore of Lake Huron. And I'm so happy to have been invited to live here with my wife, who is from Mississauga, and to have been allowed on her traditional territory within the Robertson Huron Treaty as well. So this is where I reside. I've been learning quite a bit from here as well. And I've been in this territory for about 5 years now. And so today, I am here to speak with you about Indigenous mathematics. But what is traditional mathematics? Or what is Indigenous mathematics, I should say? I looked it up in the dictionary. Unfortunately, I couldn't quite find a clear definition, so I thought I'd try to make one. And so my definition of traditional Indigenous mathematics is math that Indigenous people have used in traditional settings. Seems pretty clear. There's little spots where it might not be so clear. So Indigenous mathematics is not if 4 Anishinaabe people fit in a canoe and 6 canoes are traveling full of Anishinaabe down the river, how many Anishinaabe are traveling? Well, if we do the arithmetic, it's 24. But that's not the traditional mathematics I'm talking about. This is Indigenous mathematics, has Indigenous people in it, but it's just arithmetic. We're just following the times tables here. So yes, while using familiar technology and exposing people to Indigenous terms is great, simply having our knowledge as a placeholder in arithmetic lessons does not count as the traditional mathematics that I'm trying to articulate, math that we did in traditional settings. So, quick example, we see here a resource that does provide students an opportunity to learn about legends and teachings from an Anishinaabe community. But when we go into it, we see that the Indigenous content is simply being used in the context of arithmetic. But it is great that the students gain knowledge of a traditional story, and that is important. But what I want to focus on is the traditional knowledge that Indigenous people had that contained mathematics. And I want to articulate it in the context that educators can use within the confines of the Ontario curriculum in today's school. So this is why I call it traditional Indigenous mathematics. So this is where I'm going to give you some examples of traditional mathematics. Now, as you see, I've thrown the word Indigenous in there because when spoken in the context of Google or academia, traditional mathematics could be a number of things. It could be using straight edges that aren't marked and collapsing compasses to create geometry. It could be the gruffy, memorize the times tables. That's traditional math. Something I am known to accidentally do is refer to the great history of thousands of years of mathematics simply as Western mathematics. This is because as an Indigenous person, when something is not of an Indigenous lens, we often frame it as Western. So those wonderful professors that have been in my past and that may be watching right now, my apologies if I do let slip out the words Western mathematics. I'm not trying to say that North America has credit for all of mathematics here. So I mean no disrespect to the great many mathematicians from outside North America. Oh. Okay, I'll hold it very nicely like it's a little eagle feather. Okay, so measuring, quick examples we have here of traditional Indigenous mathematics. Measuring teepee poles before cutting trees down. So when you make a teepee, generally all the poles have to be the same length. When you go into the bush to gather the trees, how do you measure the heights of trees before they are cut down so that all of the poles are the same height? Creating parts for a canoe and the creation of bentwood boxes on the West Coast. So creating a canoe requires geometry, and Indigenous people have geometry. We have our own shape categories that can be found in our language. When Anishinaabe built canoes, how did we know that the curve of the canoe parts were correct? How is birch pitch made? Did we heat birch bark in an airtight state to allow it to distill into pitch? It needs to be airtight. We made baskets that were designed specifically to fit inside the canoe. How were those baskets designed and measured to be able to be form-fitting inside those canoes while the weight is being distributed appropriately? What did we take into consideration? How did we know where to put those baskets? Next one, the creation of tools and gardening. So if a fisherman hunted with a spear, how would they know which tree to harvest that would be the right length and width for that hunter? How would they know, or how were other tools measured when they were created? And when we gardened, what tools did we use? Did we have gardening tools? How did we make them? How did we know how far apart to plant things? Or if it was required that, or if plants required particular amounts of sun and water or shade. And how did we gather and dry rice? We see wild rice in many different Indigenous nations, in Ontario for sure. And we know that rice grows on plants and water. And how did we gather it? And what tools did we use? How was this done? When we, let me see. Oh, cooking. Anytime I've cooked kebabs with a wooden stick handle on a barbecue, the wooden stick handles always burn off. I can never get it right. Indigenous people have cooked and smoked so many types of meat. And when we cooked meat, I'm pretty sure we were using wooden sticks. So which ways did we do it so that sad kebab had a handle? My kebabs don't have those handles. What are different ways we cooked meat? How do we smoke meat? And how do we know when the smoked meat is done? You're not going to open up your smoker, let all the smoke out and go, needs another 6 hours, close it up. How did we check? How did we know? And if, last one, airflow within a teepee. In a teepee, we have a fire, and we do have a hole in the top for the smoke to escape. So if air is flowing out of the top of the teepee, where is that air coming in to displace it? And does the replacement air come in all the time? And did Indigenous people know about air displacement? So let's go into teepees. So let's go for a little tour of a teepee together on the next slide, because not everyone here has been in a teepee.
This is a teepee. Teepees were not used by all First Nations groups, but they were used by many. A teepee is shaped like a cone. Teepees come in many sizes, and the interiors could have been used for different purposes, like sleeping, cooking, or ceremony. Traditionally, a teepee is made completely out of natural materials. The poles are made from trees. What is now the canvas could have been made out of many different plants, the leaves or bark, or animal skins, depending on the available resources of that area. There is one entrance to the teepee. On the inside, we see that the poles are exposed. You can tie things onto the poles and use them like shelving. Usually, there is not electricity available, unlike the outdoor outlet we see here in this teepee.
So that was a quick video on the interior of a teepee.
This is a teepee. Teepees were not used by all First Nations.
And we can watch it again. I'm into that.
No, let's not watch it twice. That was so good. Let's watch it twice. No, not quite. Okay. There's plenty of more films that will be occurring during this that we'll be able to see with me narrating it. And so we don't need to see that one twice. So the teepee poles. How did we measure the heights of trees? Now, if you're looking outside and you see a tree standing there, you go, yeah, it's about this tall. Well, first thing we need to do is understand the depth of knowledge that First Nations people have. So, admittedly, it is hard to imagine how First Nations people traditionally harvest teepee poles while we're sitting here indoors in front of computers. So let's go for a little digital walk in a forest.
Ani, Bryan Bellefeuille, Dejnakaz, and here we're going to go for a little walk and we're going to talk about some trees that exist in our forests. And so as we come over here, I have two trees set up.
Left here we have a coniferous tree. A coniferous tree can be identified by looking at them. They have needles instead of leaves and they produce cones. A few types of coniferous trees are pine, spruce, and cedar.
And on this side we have a deciduous tree. Deciduous trees have beautiful leaves. Usually they're harder wood, and they provide fruit sometimes and flowers. And so those are the two types of trees. And so let's keep an eye out for them as we go for our walk, because naturally bushes have both trees. So we're going to go for a little walk. And here's my forest I have set up. We're going to follow this nice light path as we look at the types of trees. Think about teepee poles. How do we measure the heights of trees? Perfect. So as we went through that forest, we've seen it's randomly scattered different types of trees, and of course in a video game they're all the same height. But in the natural bush, we know there's different levels of foliage and different heights of trees. Let's go through again and notice there's a little bit of shrubbery. And let's see what we have here with all of these trees. A few different types. So when we come back and we look at these trees, they're just so beautiful, first of all. I love them. Now, there are so many different trees in a forest. Common conifers are pine, cedar, and spruce, and common deciduous trees are maple, oak, and birch. We know that they have different bark, and that some trees are thicker than others, and some are taller than others when they are fully matured. There is a cedar tree in Ontario, currently alive, estimated to be more than 1,300 years old. Because the growth rates of these trees are so different, we need to reflect and think about the depth of knowledge that First Nations people must have to be able to cut the right 18 trees needed to make the poles the same size. Now, go up here and we see a seedling in the shade. This seedling is in the middle of the bush. So how would the middle of the bush see the shade from the other trees blocking some of its light? How would that affect its growth compared to this tree?
This tree doesn't have to fight any other trees for light or water.
Let's go back over here. Again, look, the shade from that tree, it's going to be blocking it. So it's going to want to grow taller quicker. It's going to want to reach to be able to get some shade. Oh, there's a cloud passing over us. And it's going to want to grow tall first. So let's go out and let's see an extreme example. So over here on this little dark path, there's a sapling all by itself. It's right by the water. It's also kind of near sand. It's got a different base than the trees up on that cliff, so that will affect its growth rate as well. And so we come to our spot. This is where I'd like to build my teepee. It's by the water. It's on nice ground, separate from beach sand, and I just absolutely love this spot, so I made a little fire.
So miigwech for listening, and Kwa Min Minwa.
Ani.
Okay, friends, sorry. It appears that my videos will play twice, so I'll have to click it again. But we went for a little walk here, and the big takeaway I want from that little walk in the forest is that there's all sorts of different types of trees in our beautiful big forests, and depending on where they grow, there will be different growth rates depending on the availability of water and light. So those trees in the middle of the forest will grow taller quicker because they want to go reach that light, whereas a tree right in the middle of the open will get nice and big and fat right early on because it's got all the sunlight it wants to eat. And so that's what happened to me. I stood out in the sun a little too long, and I got a little wider than I should have got taller. And so here we're going to go on. That was the digital walk. So First Nations peoples whose role it is to know trees know many different intimate aspects of each different tree. And we have many different types of maple trees alone in this country. We just talk about maple tree. There's so many different types. So when you get someone who knows sap and who boils sap, when you learn to look for sweet maple trees, that's when you get good syrup. And so you need to go to the people that have that knowledge about growth rates, about the land, and about the different types of trees. That's how we need to start firstly when looking at Indigenous mathematics. So a pine grove. Because of the great variety of trees our forests give us, we need to use the same tree for all 18 poles when making a teepee. You can't go and do different trees. You got to pick the same tree to get those 18 poles. And this will show you why. If we use the same tree and it grows in similar conditions of sunlight and water, then the growth rates of that tree should be the same. So those trees, if we look in a pine grove, which is what we're about to do, we'll see that these trees have equal access to light and water, and that their growth rates look very similar.
Here we see a grove of pine trees. This one is in the village of Mississauga First Nation. We don't necessarily need pine trees. What we need is a place with many of the same tree that are good for making teepee poles.
So in a place such as this, we see many tall trees. And the question becomes, how did First Nations people measure the heights of trees to get the right size poles on their first try? We're not going to cut down 100 trees and pick which 13, 15, or 18 to use. We cut them all the first time, and they were the right size the first time. So the question becomes, how did we know which trees to cut that were the right size?
And that was a beautiful day out there. I was out there. It was so wonderful. And as you've seen, when the camera tilted an angle, we couldn't even really see the tops of the trees. So on that little digital walk, First Nations people were indeed able to measure the 18 trees before they cut them. Firstly, they made sure to use all the same type of tree so that they were all uniform. Then we found trees that were the same width, because in today's society, we know that there exists relationships between the width of a tree and its height. There's a growth rate that exists for each individual type of tree. So if you use the same type of tree, the growth rates under the same conditions will be the same. So you need to only measure the height of one tree. And when that tree is the size of the teepee you want, you find the other trees that are the same width. And that is how you get 18 poles that are the same length that you want. So, okay, this is fantastic. How do we relate it to the curriculum? Well, grade 7, patterns and relationships, modeling, number C4 in the curriculum. So in mathematics, it allows us to use modeling to make predictions. Well, when students begin to understand through making models that there is a relationship that exists between the width of a tree and its height, and they see our knowledge being used here, they see that Indigenous people thoroughly understood mathematical models, growth rates that have existed. So, as we can see, the beginning act of building a teepee does contain traditional mathematics. That is examining the relationship between the heights and widths of a tree to obtain the right amount of poles that are all the same height. Questions to check understanding could be, how thick of a pine tree do you need to create a pole of a teepee of a certain height? Now, that sounds like it's just arithmetic, but now that we have the understanding that Indigenous people had that mathematics, they didn't need, oh, it's 26 feet tall. They needed one to know whether it was a certain height that they wanted, and then they found ones that were the same width. But to check understanding, you can use math in that context. So this would help show that they understand that a relationship exists between height and widths of a tree, and that First Nations people used this modeling to make teepees. And of course, you can also reinforce the definition of diameter and circumference when you talk about the width of a tree. Now, we're about halfway through. I'm going to take a little sip here.
Bryan, can I just say I really appreciate how you are connecting to the curriculum and sharing your knowledge. So I think you're doing so much here that people are finding so useful, and just want to let you know the chat is on fire. People are loving it.
Oh,
So
fantastic. Well, that's the important thing, is we need to connect this to the curriculum, especially when curriculum, unfortunately, is an often misused word to begin with. We just need the curriculum. And it's like, well, fill in the blank. What does it mean? Anyway, I don't want to get off topic too much. But yes, I want to connect this traditional knowledge with things that are in the curriculum that need to be taught. And that's what I'm going to show you, that it does exist. And I'm giving you examples. Now, this next example, a little hard. And this one's actually science. But it's still, there's a lot to do with mathematics in both science and math. So we're going to dive into this one. And again, it's teepee themed. So we're not even moving from a different structure. This is all knowledge from one structure being gained. And this isn't all the knowledge. There's so much more. And so we'll stand here and we'll sit here and we'll examine this next subject, airflow. Airflow. So shelters are necessary to keep us healthy. Teepees are a great shelter. They keep us dry, they keep us warm, and they can be made from 100% natural materials. A fire in a teepee. Well, when you have a fire, the air around it becomes warm, and as air warms, it expands. While this expanded air is lighter than the previous cooler air, and because it's lighter, it rises above the heavier air, and it continues to rise as long as it's warmer than than the cooler air around it. So the cooler air will come into the teepee and push smoke up and out of the teepee. Fantastic. The fall and spring. During cool nights in the fall and spring, small fires are made in teepees to keep the occupants warm. Appropriate airflow is needed to ensure that the smoke exits to keep the people healthy. So this is great, but in the middle of winter is where it becomes difficult, because we need that fire to run more often, especially during those -40 days that sometimes we get, thankfully not too often this winter. This becomes difficult in the wintertime. If you have a fire in your teepee that's running most of the time, that's great, it'll keep you warm. But we need airflow for that smoke to exit. And if there's a lot of airflow, then good, you have no smoke. But if there's not enough airflow, then the smoke will stay. But if there's too much airflow, you'll get cold, because that air, where's that air coming from? Outside. And it's cold outside. That's why you're inside, of course. So let's see an example of a teepee with bad airflow on the next side. Let's see why this is important. What's he talking about? There's a hole in the top of a teepee. The smoke can go out the hole. Why is he talking about airflow? Well, here's the difficult scenario. This is why I make videos, to help us comprehend why airflow is important. So you see here, we have our smudge in our teepee, and notice how I'm not pushing down. It's not airtight. Well, we see a little bit of smoke trickling out the top, but not very much. If we were to lift this, we would actually see, lift it, you'll notice quite a bit more air starts flowing, because more air is coming through the bottom because I lifted it. Now there's room on the bottom. But once I lower it again, and if I put pressure with my hand to push it down and make sure it's airtight, notice the smoke stops coming out altogether. It's not coming out anymore. It's still smoking, but it's not coming out the top. And again, once I raise it up a little bit and I make holes, the smoke's coming out. Airtight is not good. So you see here, we have our... So what a unique concept. A teepee, it has a hole in the top, but when the bottom is airtight, the smoke stays in it. It feels weird. That the hot smoke go out. Why aren't you going out the hole? It's because there's no air to displace it. Like when you're drinking out of a juice box and you're drinking the juice, and as it squeezes, you're getting more juice. There's no air going in. That's why when you stop drinking it, all of a sudden the air goes in the straw and opens up your juice box. So in the wintertime, you can't have the bottom of the teepee closed, because if there's no air coming in, you're just going to get filled with smoke and you're going to have a bad time. No, that's not what you want. So challenges that we have are, we need to retain heat. We can't just keep the teepee open for airflow. Let's just keep it open. That's cold now. I don't want to be cold. That's why I'm inside with a fire. So we need to retain heat, but we also need airflow to keep out the smoke. So how did we stay warm? Well, let's watch a video I call On Winter Teepee Wonderings. Oh, sorry.
How did we winterize the summer teepee? Well, we know there was a small fire inside. So how did we provide airflow that was needed, that would push the smoke up and out of the top of the teepee? No, we didn't have a wood stovepipe. And how did we keep the floor of the teepee dry? We didn't have the teepee on a wooden deck. Also, how did they make a fire in the teepee on top of a wooden deck? Here we see a more accurate representation of a teepee in a little more of an accurate setting. Some questions that we still have are, how did we make sure that airflow is much better in this teepee? And how did we keep the floor dry?
Oh my goodness. Can you hear those update sounds?
Yeah, but it's okay, Brian. I think it's just a cheerful little chime.
Oh,
Keep
that's
going.
fantastic.
You're doing great. This is great.
Okay. So how did we? And of course, I've seen a few people giggling when we had that deck on that teepee. Yeah, you can't quite have a fire on a deck. And we never really had those nice wooden decks with 2x4s on our teepees. So let's look at a diagram. No, not the greatest diagram, but hey, it's fantastic by my accounts. I'm not as great of an artist as Sam Yanskin, but hey, let's get some color and a teepee going. So let me explain this diagram. So these orange lines are the teepee canvas. Notice that there's actually two layers of this teepee canvas. There's the long line, the long teepee shape. There's two lines that go all the way to the top of the teepee, but they actually don't touch the ground. They leave a gap there. Now there's a second set of lines. Those are the shorter orange lines on the inside. Those shorter lines on the inside are more teepee canvas. Now, what this does is it does touch the ground and it rises up. Now, it's not touching this layer of canvas. It's just near it. Now, these two layers form a wall that directs airflow and creates surface area along these teepee walls that heat up this incoming air. So in dark blue, we have incoming air, and I tried to show a little direction here. So there's the head of the arrow, and there's the direction coming in. And so this exterior air comes in. It gets heated when it's between the two walls, and it comes up. Now, this air isn't hot yet, but it is hotter than it is outside. It's warmer than the outside air, but it's still cooler than the air directly above the fire. So it actually drops down. And then it moves around the base until it gets near the fire, and then it shoots up and out because it's so hot. And so these lighter blue arrows show that that hot air goes straight up and out. That's how the smoke comes out. And that's why in a teepee, when you sit in these spots, you're not covered in smoke. And that air is heated through the entryway. That exterior air does not immediately enter the teepee through a window. Crack a window in your house, that air is coming right in. Wow, we didn't have windows in teepees. That air come right in from outside. No, we had those pathways so that the air heated before it even got to us. So we had forced air heating right there, friends. So, and it is forced air because our fire, that heated air is pushing up and out. And because of air displacement, even if there's no wind outside, we're sucking in the air from the outside because of air displacement. So it is forced air heating. Thank you very much. So that is how the airflow is in that winter teepee. Now, I want you to slowly realize that a teepee is heavily engineered. We made those poles and it took a lot of math. We didn't even talk about the canvas or how the door is designed or how you make it. How do you get birch bark and canvas and hides way up that high? Did we make ladders? Did we hoist each other on each other's shoulders and say, no, get Dr. a stool. He's taller. Bring him over. No, we didn't. We didn't have him around to hoist us on his shoulders and help us out. No, we have to slowly realize that a teepee is heavily engineered. It does need appropriate airflow. It needs to retain heat. It needs to be set up so that flooding does not occur on the bottom from melting snow. You need to plan where your teepee is because that heat, that air, snow will melt. And is the bottom of your teepee going to be a little puddle? Nobody wants a whole house for a sauna. No. The floor was dry. So with this example of the airflow at teepee, we realize that we are able to cover the understanding needed for students to complete a portion of the grade 6 science curriculum, which is the properties of airflow. Now, if you've taught this right away, you're going to slam into the chat and say, hey, wait a second. In grade 6 properties of airflow, it's actually only about flying machines, the properties of airflow regarding flying machines. Yes, this is true. But before you get talking about the very different mechanics on flying machines and how that affects with the property of air, when you're just teaching the properties of air, a teepee is a great opportunity to show the immense traditional knowledge that Indigenous people have. And then you go in to flying structures, because of course a teepee shouldn't be a flying structure. If it is, you might have done it wrong. Okay, so learning and teaching traditional mathematics. So you cannot learn traditional mathematics from a book. You need to go do it. I always encourage people to start with something they're interested in. So think of a traditional activity right now. Use it at home right now. Think of a traditional activity that you are interested in. How did we gather the resources? When did we gather it? Why did we gather that resource? And how did we know that that particular resource was correct? I strongly encourage you, think of a topic you're interested in, whether it's trapping, medicine picking, gardening, asking about trapping. So whether you ask about the traps being made or the animals being trapped, there are many components. Now, sustainable harvesting is a hot topic right now. It's all over preserving the environment. We are over harvesting in many aspects of this world. So how did the Anishinaabe know when to stop killing beavers so that they do not overtrap a pond? Preserving beavers in their homes sustains our access to meat in our homes. When did we collect medicines, and how do we not over harvest them? How did we ensure there were enough food for months from now? So when we survive a winter, we need to gather and store and preserve enough food. How did we know we have enough? When you go buy seed packages at Walmart, it tells you, the estimated growth and how much you're going to get out of it. But our seeds didn't come with those instructions and our expected amount of food we'll gather from it. So these are difficult. Traditional mathematics learning plan. I hope you're ready. Oh no, I have to make a learning plan. Yes, you do. Absolutely. So in order for educators to succeed, you need to create a learning plan for you. So your math plan is simple. It just requires your time and your effort and open ears and an open heart, of course. You will make mistakes, but you will learn. You will refine your knowledge further, and you will educate many people in our society. The first step, like I said, finding something you are interested in. The second step, write out your thoughts on where mathematical concepts might lie in this topic. Be as thorough as possible because you're just doing it with yourself. The third step, write out questions you have about your interest. First, write general questions about the topic itself. How do we choose where and when to hunt, and who did we bring on our hunting parties? Then slowly refine your questions to concepts of math. How was wood chosen to create arrows? How is the shape of an arrowhead made? How did the arrow rest on the string of the bow? Were there sights on bows? Did hunters have a way to measure the height that they had to shoot the arrow in order to hit a target that's a certain distance away, like on modern bows? On a fourth step, this is your fourth step now. Write down your possible contacts to start learning. Write local First Nations or other organizations. Write down the names of teachers and knowledge holders that you believe can help you on this journey. Grab tobacco, grab Tim Hortons gift cards, and ask around. Not everyone uses tobacco in that traditional sense, but some are still great knowledge holders. So you'll need Tim Hortons gift cards. That's what we'll need. So learning in a community. Well, there's a community teacher. How are Ontario teachers certified? Well, by a list of post-secondary institutions approved by the province. So First Nations communities each have appointed teachers. There are no set guidelines that are approved by any sort of ministry. The people of that place know who the experts are in a community. So ask around the community. In my community, we have a few crafting elders, but no one calls them a crafting elder, and no one calls themselves a crafting elder. But those are the people that hold the knowledge about crafting so you can make things. So that's where you need to go. And they won't be able to articulate the math. That's where your knowledge has to come from. So you'll need to find the right knowledge keeper for the topic you're looking in. Something to consider when you're looking. The Ojibwe word used for chief in many communities is ogama. However, ogama does not literally mean chief. It actually further describes someone with many followers. And so find a knowledge keeper that has many followers. So Shkabewis is someone who's learning. So when I learn, I have to consider certain traditional protocols. Now, because you're a learner, elders and knowledge keepers know that you're a learner. They'll respect that process, but when they inform you of protocol, you do need to follow it. And so some of them will accept tobacco because they're knowledge keepers, right? Some of them will. And some of them, like I said, will accept Tim Hortons gift cards because it's the act of showing that you're respecting their time. When you give them tobacco, tell them what you want to learn and the context that you're doing. Say you want to teach others and you want kids in these new generations to know that we have this math. You might have to come out to multiple lessons to learn the topic. One of the elders in my community knew I wanted to build sweat lodges and I was invited to. And he's seen I was asking so many questions that he just invited me to his backyard just to practice building sweat lodges with him. And that's what we did. It wasn't for any particular purpose. He took down the sweat lodge about a week later. But he built it because he's seen I wanted to learn. And you have to take that time. Ask if you can take notes or photos. Don't just take notes or photos. And ask them if they want to hear or see a draft of your lesson. And for sure, ask if you are allowed to teach particular parts of that knowledge. The dinner ham. Always learning, the dinner ham. So the reason we need to be there present in the bush asking questions when we learn traditional mathematics is because we need to experience the why behind the teaching. So across all cultures, we have stories of food, of how our grandmothers cooked and prepared the best. My grandmother prepared the best meal around, you know. And even if you've written down her recipe, you could never recreate that same meal. You had to be there to learn it and see the little details. Well, growing up, my mom always cooked the best ham at family dinners. And as I grew up, I would watch her and follow her in the kitchen. And she gave me more and more tasks as I grew up. And every year she'd tell me, don't forget to cut the end off the ham. And so I continued to do this well into my childhood. Cut the end off the ham, put it in the roasting pan. So as I was much older, I was helping cook at my mother-in-law's. And they asked me, hey, can you prepare that ham? I think they were just trying to see how well I could cook. And so I grabbed this big ham and I slap it on the cutting board. And I get ready and I cut the butt off that ham. And they seen that. And they all turn their head and they go, well, why did you cut the butt off that ham? And I said, well, that's how I was taught, don't you? So my mother always did it. And so finally, after we ate, and they asked again, do you know why you cut the butt off that ham? I said, no, I don't. They said, you should call her. So I called my mom and I said, Mom, why do we cut the butt off the ham? She goes, oh, so it can fit in the roasting pan. So, like, there might be a reason why she's doing a particular thing, and we might be copying it wrong. That's the point of that story. So always ask why particular actions are being taken during your activities. And here we are. This is my last slide. This is the end. It's my name. It's my email. It's my cell phone number. Oh, no. And then it's my Facebook, which is just my regular name. And as you see here, now you can reach me and ask me some questions if you need assistance. I always offer this at the end of a presentation. I've never, of course, had a presentation online before. So we'll see how this goes. So miigwech kanawiya. That's it for me for this moment. And so what I will do is I will now stop sharing my screen.
Thanks, Bryan. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing your contact information, because I have to tell you, there's a lot of questions, and I hope we get to them all in the next 11 minutes. I'm going to throw to John Paul to ask the first few. Wow. But all I have to say is I think I like science again. So thank you. Thank you for that.
You've restored her faith in the science. Chief Miigwech, Bryan, that was really informative and fun and funny. And as you were mentioning the Tim Hortons gift cards, I was thinking, it's been a long time since I've been through Blind River. I was on my way to the Sioux one time, and I was seeing all the billboards like, you're 20 minutes from Tim's, you're 10 minutes from Tim's, you're 5 minutes from Tim's. I was like, where's this Tim's? It must be really special. So yeah, good to be reminded that the Tim's gift cards are like, they're like gold. Another one I've heard some elders say they like is help me with my electricity bill. So it depends. They all say something different. And being out here on the West Coast, I want to remind people too, there's other protocols out here, different protocols. So you need to check what is the local protocol, and then that's your way in. If you do it with a good heart and in a good way, you'll be helped, I'm sure. So one of the questions I had for you, Bryan, a simple one, first of all, is just, are those videos available somewhere for teachers to use? Can they find your like Animal Crossing tree tour?
Okay, thank you. So those videos I currently have listed on my YouTube as private. So my name, Bryan Bellefeuille. I go by Mr. Bell in the school. As an Ojibwe language teacher, I try not to walk around with such a long French name. And so I just go by Mr. Bell. And so on YouTube, if you type in Mr. space Bell with no punctuation and hit enter, you'll find me, but you'll notice none of those videos are on there, because those teaching videos, they need to be presented in a certain context. And I'm more than happy to share the link. So they are viewable if people have the link, but they're not that public viewable for people to just stumble upon, especially because a lot of the videos, if you go to Mr. Bell on YouTube, you'll notice it's a lot of children's based YouTube videos, of me in the language. And so that's the cheer I try to bring these young youth in my school, these videos in the language through different video games. Anyway, so they are on my YouTube channel, and if you ask me, I am more than willing to provide them to you if they're done in a nice, great way.
Cool. I know that some people would like to have another look at those, and this video will be made available as well, so people can come back and refer to that as well. I wanted to ask you a tough one because we don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to throw the tough one at you, and I'm just kind of curious if you can talk a bit about the appropriation issue. So one of the questions we had was, how do I know when I've crossed the line from teaching traditional mathematics and appropriating the culture? What criteria can I use to speak respectfully about knowledge that is not my own? I know this is one that comes up a lot, so I was curious how you would respond.
Well, I mean, gosh, it's difficult, but if you spend the time with knowledge keepers and elders to learn the topic, generally they should be around the first few times you actually teach it. When we're at a fire and we're telling stories, we would peer review each other's stories. You would tell a story, and the others around would help correct and guide you and tell slight variations if they need to have that story being told. So it was in our hearts that we knew when things were being done in the right way with the right knowledge. And so as an educator, my goal is to teach children and give them this great knowledge that they might not have had otherwise, especially knowing that these youth will become, the public servants of the future. And for them to have this great knowledge about Indigenous people would just be profound. And so as you're teaching this knowledge, to avoid appropriation, I would ask you to reflect on, why am I teaching this? If you're teaching bead counting from a loom and not giving many traditional thoughts with it and saying this is patterning, why are we doing that? What more could be included? It's a difficult one. If you're doing it in a good way, I would say, yeah, that's a very difficult question to answer, which you said it was. But check with traditional knowledge holders and elders, and they'll let you know.
Yeah, that's good advice. And it's kind of like the dinner ham too. Like, why are we doing this? It's good to be asking that question of ourselves as we make our choices. Why am I doing this? We had a couple of technical questions. I guess maybe I'll start with the TP questions. One of the questions was, does the width to height ratio change for different regions for the same type of trees? And maybe I'll just start with that.
Absolutely. So with the height ratios on TPs, yeah. So my drawing with a pen was not to any aspect ratio at all. It was, I took a quilting triangle and I turned it and I drew on it. That's what I used. And quilting triangles were not ways we originally measured the triangularness of a teepee. No, the width, the height is not in itself a ratio within a teepee. Within the pole, in its growth rate, in a tree, in a forest, with sunlight and location and access, that is. But a teepee itself would not. They could be made wider than they are skinnier. It would depend. Now on modern days, we have a canvas, and that canvas is made to a particular height and width. So using contemporary materials, yeah, your teepee will have to fit a particular width and height. But traditionally, if some communities used birch bark panels on the outside of their teepees or different types of materials, then that was added on after, and that would just be formed around the teepee itself.
Okay, thanks for that. And speaking of the canvas, that we had a question about the gap. So can that gap be adjusted to regulate the amount of airflow, or was it always like the same size gap?
Oh, that's a great question. So it depends where your teepee is being made. It depends what materials are being used. Modern context, canvas is literally just canvas, so you can go out of your teepee and hike it up or hike it lower. Now, this is a good question because you ask about the canvas. Now, one thing I never talked about that you should be aware of on the top of a teepee are air flaps. And they control, depending which direction the wind is coming that way, they can control the direction and the amount of air flowing up and out. So if you need more air, and if the wind is allowing you to, you need to open that top up more. But unfortunately, that has to be taught at that time in that place and not really, that's the context. So yes, adjusting the gap on the bottom could work, but there's more. But wait, there's more. I'm going to Billy Mays you. On the top, there's air vents. Whoa. So we even had an air vent to control the output.
Oh, that's great. I can remember teaching in a teepee at Trent University one winter, and it was like -10, when the snow starts to squeak when you're walking on it. And we were nice and toasty in that teepee and no smoke. And now I know why. So all these years later, I've learned the science behind it. That's great. Maybe we can wrap up the Q&A section with a fun one. We just wanted to hear a bit more about how you created that animated walk through the forest. I think that was a question in the chat.
Oh, okay. It's a video game that became popular. It was released right at the beginning of March pandemic. And so my wife was Bobby. She was waiting. She was pregnant. And we had the right Nintendo consoles. And I'm watching this. And I'm like, wow, look, you can edit your forest. You can select trees to be saplings or different. Like, wow, this is cool. And I thought, I had these little kids and it was that emergency learning. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be nice if they had little videos from this? And so my first few were just me singing happy birthday playing on an instrument, which you could see on my YouTube channel. I send that to people to sing them a little COVID happy birthday. But that's how this grew. It's a popular video game that is available. And I just screen captured what I was doing and voiced over it.
Excellent. Is that Animal Crossing?
Not correct. It is Animal Crossing. That is the video game. It's the newest one, and I haven't kept up with all the updates, and so I don't have all the festivity materials, unfortunately.
I hear you. It was fascinating. I was just like loving the music, and your narration was excellent as well.
I was enjoying the joy dances. That's what I liked.
Absolutely. Okay, well, we weren't able to get to all the questions within the hour, everyone, but Bryan did give you his contact information, so we hope you'll reach out. There was so much interest in the chat. Larissa, though, I'm going to throw to you. I know that as we wrap up, you have some thanks to say.
Yes, absolutely. First of all, Bryan, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your experience with us today. I was looking at the chat and people were just commenting about how engaged you are, how powerful your experiences are, and sharing your experiences with all of us, how relevant your examples were. And I think you inspired a lot of educators today to take up Indigenous ways of knowing in math and science. You inspired Angela, saying you inspired her in science again. So that's really great. Thank you so much. I also want to thank Angela and John Paul for facilitating the discussion and partnering with us on this series. And then finally, a big thank you to the Robertson team. All the people behind the scenes, Callan, Zach, Julia, Alicia, Rebecca, and Hannah, to kind of help make this webinar happen. So thank you to everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, Larissa. And yeah, we've never looked this good. Like your team is, I've been so relaxed this entire webinar. So thank you so much, which is not true if you watch the other ones, which you can find everybody at www.angelanardozzi.com/webinars for free. Okay, so I know we also want to have some thanks as well. I believe our project, John Paul, is still sponsored by Schulich. Is that true?
That's right. The Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada is providing some money for this very topic of supporting Indigenous perspectives in your teaching practice. So thanks to Schulich for supporting our work. And I have to say thanks to Robertson as well, because this is just wonderful. And Angela, with all the promotion through Listen and Learn, it's great to partner with you both.
Thanks, John Paul. I'll say that John Paul has a research project happening, everybody. I've put the link in the chat to an totally optional survey that we hope you might fill out about your teaching Indigenous education, and we'll also be sending that through the Eventbrite. Also, we've got another webinar coming up in March. I believe it's March 29th. We put that Eventbrite in the chat. And I think that might be it. Bryan, thank you so much. That was amazing. I laughed so much tonight. That was like a great belly laugh for me. And it was just so wonderful to get to know you a little bit better. So thank you.
Well, thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Awesome.